Thank you very much for the panel for joining me today. We have a truly international panel from all around the world, which includes Dr. AYESHA Abdullah, who is Acting Vice President and Academic Affairs of Executive Dean in Business at the Higher Colleges of Technology at the UAE, Professor Caroline Evans, who's Vice Chancellor and President of Griffith University in Australia, Sally Jeffrey, who is Global Education and Skills Network Leader for PwC, Professor PHAKENG, who is Vice Chancellor at the University of Cape Town, South Africa, and Professor Robin Mason, who is Pro-Vice Chancellor International at the University of Birmingham in the UK. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the issue of faculty support and internationalism are ones that have become more complex over the past 18 months, owing to both the mass shift to online and the other restrictions placed on people's time and movement. Before we start our main discussion points, I'd like to hand over to Sally so she can tell us a little bit about how PwC are working with their university partners around the world to address this. Sally?
Thank you, Alistair. Hello, everybody. Yes, I thought I'd take a minute just to explain why PwC have created this alliance with Times Higher Ed and why this is so important to us. So for many years now, PwC has had its purpose to solve important problems and build trust in society. And over the last couple of years, we've realized how much harder that's becoming both for us and for our clients. Building trust in a society that has higher expectations than ever is getting more challenging around transparency, etc., and solving problems in a sustainable way that embraces what technology has to offer, and also some of the challenges placed on society from climate change is also getting really, really tough. Now, PwC works with obviously many clients around the world, and over 3,000 odd of those are education clients. And through the experience of supporting our education clients, we realised how important the academic sector, higher education, both in terms of graduating talents that can help society build trust and solve important problems, but also in the research that it can do to genuinely create those solutions, those sustainable outcomes. And so hence, we thought it would be great if we could organise roundtables around the territories where we have significant practices and start the dialogue with our academic clients, with faculty, to understand how better faculty can be supported in order to become more effective, both in their teaching mandate and also their research mandate. And so that was the goal behind this alliance. This is the beginning, we hope, of some very fruitful discussions. We held roundtables in the Middle East, where I'm based, in Africa, in Southeast Asia, and also in the UK. And I extend a thanks to my fellow panelists here who have generously given their time to share some of the key points that were discussed during their regional roundtables, and also to discuss some of the commonality across the different regions. So thank you very much, Alistair, for the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to participating.
Great, thank you very much, Sally. I'd like to kick us off by speaking about the role of blended learning, which now sits at the heart of so much teaching that universities deliver to their students, and the challenges that people have faced over the past 18 months to deliver that, not just locally, but also internationally with colleagues and cohorts scattered around the world. So I'd like to start by asking the panel, what have you been putting in place in order to ensure that the right resources are there for staff to both develop and deliver blended learning to your cohorts? MAMOKGETI, could we come to you first? I'm aware that the University of Cape Town has done quite a lot in this area.
Yes, thanks, Alistair. So for us at the University of Cape Town, I mean, we were fortunate that when the pandemic hit, we were already on our journey to blended learning. So we through our Center for Innovation in Learning and Teaching. So we had just installed, I mean, besides the fact that we were already having other work happening in online, we had just installed in 2018 One Button Studio for lecturers who would like to do some work in recording, in having some of their lessons online whilst they're teaching face to face. So that was in place, and then there was also, of course, a culture of recording all our lectures in a big lecture halls, and then we would put them online for our students to access. So when the pandemic hit and we had the lockdown, we scaled that up. I mean, we already had about 60% of our academic staff having already doing some form of online teaching just to support student learning. And of course, because our issue was how do we improve student success? And so use of digital resources was a way to do that. So we started having formally sessions to help not only our academic staff, but for other academic staff around South Africa. We ran sessions on preparing for online teaching and learning. We ran those sessions for the rest of South Africa, and those sessions were free. They could access them virtually. And we felt that if we don't do that, then academics end up just recording stuff on their phones or not actually knowing how do you prepare for blended learning. So we started doing that. So essentially, what happened? We fast-tracked our strategy for online teaching and learning to support student success.
And what was the response from staff? I mean, was there some apprehension about it, or people generally positive? Did you notice the way that they approach their work change significantly during the past 18 months?
It's changed significantly. I mean, some academics went in boots and all and became even much more creative than we've ever thought. And some of them were a bit apprehensive. Some of them were saying, well, the interaction is much more important because this wasn't, during the lockdown, this wasn't blended. It was all completely online. And so they worried about the fact that they don't have contact with their students. But at the end of the year, I mean, one of the things that happened in the Senate Teaching and Learning Committee was all faculties basically talking about how pleased they are about what they have managed to do, that they never thought they would be able to do. And so for me, it says, as an uncomfortable as it was a challenge. Of course, it was a huge amount of work for academics who hadn't planned to do that. But it was at the end of the year, a point of us congratulating our academics and them being proud of what they have produced. Of course, if you search online, you'll see that there's a lot of South African academics who did write an open letter about their dissatisfaction about online learning. And last year we called it remote emergency learning, right? Because it was done fast and it was emergency. But the issue is the big issue that they got concerned about was the lack of social interaction. And our view is that in the context of blended learning, social interaction is there. But of course, I think we need to be talking about social interaction online. How do you build communities of online virtual communities of practice? And we started putting those conversations on the table and saying, actually, it is possible to do this. So how do you facilitate that? There's some value in human connection and talking eye to eye, but there's a whole lot that we get by having the digital resources and what we can do with that facility. Having someone who's currently maybe in Dubai or in Cambodia, who's an expert in a field, and we can then get them to contribute in our lectures. And that's some of the things that academics found very useful, that you're not locked into just standing in front, that you can draw on some resource that's online and insert it in the middle of your teaching whilst you're interacting with the students. So there's, as time goes on, there's more and more value of what the digital resources make available to us to improve teaching and learning and to support student success.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Carolyn, I'd like to come to you next. Perhaps I see you nodding in agreement, which is always fatal on Zoom because you know you're going to get asked the next question. But the point that MAMOKGETHI made about having perhaps guest lectures or greater international collaboration, how have you managed that cultural shift at your institution?
Yeah, thanks, ALISTAIR. And just as we've been talking about place over the course of this session, can I begin by acknowledging that I'm talking tonight from the land of the Turrbal and the Yagara people, and they've been engaged in cultural interactions for tens of thousands of years on this land that I'm speaking to you from today. So yeah, I completely agree. We were already on an important journey around digital learning, and we've had some amazing staff who had pre-existing digital resources that were outstanding and creative and replicated things, didn't just replicate what we did physically, putting a camera up and recording a lecture, but actually used digital resources for purposes that could never have been captured face to face. So people teaching water management who had extraordinary visuals and flyovers of whole water basins that were prepared in Australia and then taught into Afghanistan. And they clearly, for multiple reasons, couldn't travel to Afghanistan over the last 12 months, but they had an amazing digital package that did that work. We had people setting up avatars to run their own pharmacies to learn both about the pharmacy side and also the business side. So that was fantastic. And that did allow us to have many creative faculty who realised that they could start inviting international guests who were often locked up in their own house, and so had more time and energy and interest in just engaging here in Australia. Everywhere's a long way from Australia. So, to get people to come on a plane and teach here in person takes a lot of time and energy, carbon, and money from those people. So to be able to bring them in digitally has been fantastic. But one of the notes of caution I would just say is we can spend a lot of time focusing on the sophisticated, the interesting, and we really should do that because it's where the cutting edge is. But we had to be very careful to test our assumptions about all of the things that make this sort of learning possible. It was not the case that all staff, and certainly not all students, had access to computers at home, had access to internet at home. Home is not a safe place for everybody. Home is not a quiet environment for everybody. And women, both faculty and our students who had children in particular, really struggled with some of those issues. So when we're talking about supporting faculty, we need to put a lot of really important pedagogical software, personal development tools, everything that we're talking about with UCT. Absolutely. But we actually had to get some basics right. We had to loan out computers to folks. We had to try and make sure they're connected to the internet because we hadn't understood perhaps quite how reliant, particularly our students, first in family to university, from refugee backgrounds, from Pacifica backgrounds. A number of the communities we served were on university resources to do those things. So you're really important to think about the sophisticated, about the global, about all of those wonderful opportunities. But if we don't get those fundamentals right, we will simply be reinforcing existing inequalities, both domestically and globally. And so I think it's really important in this conversation that we also have some mind to that.
And what have been the feedback loops that you put in place in order to gather sort of the right information from staff to identify the pain points and be able to respond to them effectively?
Well, this is another way in which technology actually proved to be surprisingly good. We work over half a dozen campuses spread across a lot of southeast Queensland. I spend a lot of time on the road traditionally. We put in place a series of town halls where I would speak to staff directly, and we could have 2,500 staff online at a time. And we opened those town halls up to any questions that any staff had. It allowed them to give us a sense of what they were thinking, what they were feeling, what the pain points were in real time, and to hear the answers in real time and to learn from one another through those questions and answers as well. We also had smaller groups, regular staff pulse surveys, town halls with students, and the students gave us some very useful feedback. One of the things I found interesting was that the most advanced and ambitious staff were using platforms that were different to one another, often again required software, which students had to pay for, which they didn't like. But in fact, the students were struggling to learn all of the different teaching methodologies. So while we were letting 1,000 flowers bloom and thinking that was a good thing, and our staff who were really technologically advanced were pushing the boundaries, they weren't necessarily bringing the students with them. So it was really important to hear that feedback from students, that they needed staff not to just assume they were digital natives and it would all be easy, but actually to help them to understand how to learn online and the fact that that was a different skill.
Great, thank you very much. Dr. Ayesha, can I come to you next, please, just to ask you about the specific challenges that you've been dealing with in the region and how you've addressed them in order to help staff feel supported and enabled to do their job in different ways now?
I think our staff and our colleges face, similar challenges that were faced by other universities globally. And HCT being a multi-campus, environment, like other universities, like Griffith, for example, we already had an online strategy for many, many years, actually for decades. And because that was the way we communicate. So I think we had the advantage of we had a lot of technology infrastructure. And a lot of our faculty were trained on this technology. So when COVID hit, for example, it was very easy for our faculty and our technology to very quickly pivot and go completely online. The other advantage we also have is UAE is a highly connected country. We have a very high internet penetration. So we didn't really have a lot of challenges there. We did have some students, that we had to support in order to bring in, to lend them computers, but generally speaking, that was very, very few students. And then really where we had to spend a lot of time was on redesigning some of the courses that were really geared for a face-to-face delivery. Because we already had some online courses that were completely redesigned for the online environment, but we had courses that were designed for face-to-face. So it was a question of then transitioning these courses to be more friendly to online delivery, because of course, when you want to be able to do that, it's a totally different setup in terms of how you approach the curriculum. And another issue that was of concern to us was student interaction and student engagement in this, completely online environment, especially during the COVID. And then it meant that we had to embed a lot of technology, like, we're using, for example, Nearpod to encourage interaction between the students and the faculty. We also have programs which are very technical. We have engineering, we have health sciences that depend on labs. So the advantage again there we had was we already were using a lot of simulations. So we kind of invested more and we put in a lot more investment in getting more licenses for these simulations, and then we transition into the online right now. The blended, now that we're really going on the blended learning, which is, of course, some face-to-face, some online. We've, through this experience, we've learned a lot of things. And we could leverage, like my colleagues already mentioned, international collaborations with other universities, as well as some virtual student exchange, bringing guest speakers to the classroom. A lot of things that we were able to leverage, which made technology, which technology enabled and made it easy for us. Again, faculty PD, this is where I think we also spend a lot of time to bring up all the faculty up to speed, using the technology, especially the older faculty that perhaps were not, technology savvy. So we spent some time doing that. But another thing, I think what we also did was, how do we replicate a lot of the services that we offer the students in a face-to-face environment, in an online environment? And we created, we have already invested in building that infrastructure to provide all the services online. But the COVID kind of accelerated that. So in a span of about 6 months, we got all our services, student services on online. In terms of faculty, I think different faculty responded to the online and the blended learning differently. Like I would expect that was the case in most universities. Of course, many people were very enthusiastic and they enjoyed the ability to use technology and the advantages it brings. And then, of course, there were others that were not so keen, but it was a question of bringing them along and making sure that everybody is on the same page. And I think we've managed to pivot things very quickly and get everybody comfortable with the systems we had in place. And we constantly, of course, got feedback from faculty, from students. We polled them. We got, we used, again, technology to reach a lot of people that we would not on average reach. And those were it was fed into the improvements.
To Carolyn's earlier point about making learning communities and having people learn online in a different way, does that kind of peer support from both faculty and students, did you find that helped perhaps some of the people who found it harder to manage the shift to online and move away from a face-to-face model?
Yeah, I think for the students, we have a student success center where we set up a hotline because, yes, again, the transition was not easy for some students, although I think a lot of our students come from the Z generation, that digital natives. So yes, but some of them still required some support. So we had a 24-hour something like a call center where they could call and get support if they were having technical problems and connectivity issues, or they had issues with their Blackboard Learn, which is our learning management system, or any other issues that they might have faced. And we also created an opportunity for students to interact and to support each other, to learn from each other. And the same setup was set up for the faculty so that they can learn from each other. And I think a lot of learning has happened through this, and people have come together to support. And I think that we had a lot of, initially there was, group of faculty perhaps that wasn't very keen on going online. But I think it's like, what do they say? Necessity is the mother of invention. Everybody came together to respond to the emergency that we were in. And I think after they've gone through that process, it was easy for them to kind of reflect and say, oh, it's not, many of them came and said, oh, it was not what we expected. In fact, we're actually happy. The only issue, I think, is just the isolation, people not having that human interaction. And I think that was hard for both the faculty and students.
Okay, thank you very much. Robin, I'd like to bring you in now to talk about Birmingham's work a little bit and the broader application of the cultural change that's going on at universities at the moment, because obviously Birmingham is an institution that does have an international profile and has campuses in different countries. But wider to that, the engagement now that the opportunities that exist to engage with staff and students in different ways through the way that teaching and learning is changing. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on the broader application across the whole university's function in terms of how does this change the setup of courses that perhaps make it easier to integrate it with research or employability, or and looking at that through an international lens and removing the shackles of having to have everything in person. Is this already presenting opportunities that you've capitalised on at Birmingham, or is it something that's a part of a longer term strategy, or maybe both?
Thanks, ALISTAIR, and I'll try not to repeat all of the good points that fellow panelists have already made. So let me make a few points on the positive, and then I'll, if it's all right, I'll be the one that details a little bit some of the remaining challenges, because certainly wouldn't pretend that the University of Birmingham has got all the solutions, and I'm rather hoping to pick the brains of fellow panelists so that we can steal good ideas from them. I think the first thing to say is it has been remarkable, I think, how much creativity and how much resilience both staff and students have shown over the last 18 months. I think we've hopefully dispelled some myths held about the sector that, you know, universities are slow moving and give us a century and we might innovate. We've really shown what we're capable of, and I think, but critically, that's both staff and students. So it's been a real partnership in that regard. A few things that we've learned is that we've known for a while that research is more and more a team exercise. So even in my own discipline, I'm an economist, you see that the lone scholar production of research is a rather dated thing, and more people are doing research in teams, and that's not just the sciences, that's also humanities and social science. We found that a lot of our teaching was an individual exercise, and actually one thing that we've had to do just for robustness and resilience is move much more to team teaching. So that if one person was unable to teach in any particular week, that's fine, because there's a team of people delivering a particular course or module, and others could step in. And that's really, I think, that's also supported peer learning, because actually some of the best ideas of what to do over the last 18 months have come from the community of not just academics, but also professional services staff. And that's really been helped by moving towards much more team production of teaching as well as research. It's made it we found much easier to engage with students. Ensuring that there are weekly meetings with academic tutors so that you get that feedback loop of finding out what it is that is working for students and what needs more attention. And it also highlighted to us that we've got a pretty complex structure of academic programs. So we have modules of different shapes, sizes, durations, credits. And so one thing that we're doing, it's going to take a little while to be done because people will know it's complex stuff, but we're standardizing the shape of academic modules, essentially so that I always view these things as a bit of a packing problem. So if you've got lots of irregular shapes, trying to pack them into a timetable that has lots of flexibility is incredibly complicated. So we're moving to a much more standardized modular structure, which will do a few things: make timetabling much easier, will allow students much more flexibility in how they choose modules and piece together their programs, and also create space in the curriculum to embed things like employability and international experience. That is kind of, I think we would have got there eventually, but has been accelerated because of the last 18 months, where we've realized that one of the things that just made things very difficult for us was this very, very complex structure. Happy to say more on that, but if I turn to some of the remaining challenges, actually a couple of them have already been alluded to, but I'll say them again. We don't have a good solution for lab-based subjects. We probably don't make as much use of simulations as we ought to, but I think the general feeling is that simulations just aren't there yet as a perfect substitute for hands-on in work in the lab. I think we're really struggling to know how to make the best use of hybrid. So we do pure distance learning programs, but the core of our teaching is a residential model. And then the question is, when there are people physically present in a room and people who are present virtually, how do you make that experience equivalent? And we see it for meetings, actually, don't we? I don't think we've cracked how you have a mixed meeting where some people are in the room and some people are up on a screen. And there are a variety of challenges there. One thing that we have found is that, as I think Ayesha said, there's very variable engagement virtually. So ensuring that the students who are present virtually are really as active as and engaged as students who are in the room, I don't think we've quite cracked that. And the third thing that I would say is that I'm optimistic on this, but we still have more to do to ensure that assessment virtually and at distance is as robust as physical modes of assessment. I don't want to exaggerate, but we have seen a small increase in cases where clearly people have been using opportunities virtually to complete their assessment. Fortunately, the systems are pretty good for catching that sort of stuff, but that's something that I think we're going to have to iron out over the next 12 months. So labs, the hybrid experience, and how you address assessment, I think are three things that we still haven't quite resolved as a university.
And do you think there'll be effectively a dual response to this? One will be waiting for changes or applications of technology in order to solve these problems better. And perhaps in some cases, it will be a case of moving things back to the physical environment in the short term too, because you can perhaps exert a little bit more control over these areas when you are doing them face to face.
Yeah, I see all of the above. I think it is going to be a blend of changing models of assessment, so that if you set questions in a particular way, then you do create opportunities for certain websites to provide answers. So actually, but if you're smarter about how you do assessment and you test deep learning rather than something that can just be posted online to get solutions to, I think systems will help they already do, to spot where that occurs. I won't give away all of the secrets of how we do it, but we all know how we set assessments in order to ensure that there isn't any kind of deviation. But also, I think eventually that there will be a component, yes, that's physical. I don't see assessment becoming entirely online. So I think it's going to be a variety of different responses actually for all of these things, which makes it quite exciting, I think, because I think we've had a lot of innovation over the last 18 months. I think there's going to be lots more innovation, particularly actually as people have got used to a culture where they can try things, they can experiment, and if it doesn't work, they can try something else. So I think that's been a huge benefit to an otherwise very difficult last 18 months, but it's really opened people's eyes to what's possible.
Great, thank you very much. I'd like to ask our panel what they're most optimistic about in terms of what they anticipate being able to continue to improve upon and continue to perhaps scale or diversify in different ways, or grow their opportunities to not just support staff and, as everyone's mentioned, help them innovate, but also take a very broad outlook of what is now possible for universities with their teaching and their research. MAMOKGETI, you've got your hand raised. Would you like to go first?
Yeah, I wanted to say, by the way, I agree with Ayesha about supporting students from low socioeconomic class. And the thing is that we had already started giving laptops to all students who are on financial aid when the pandemic hit. So we continue to do that, and we just grew it more. And of course, we are not as wired as UAE is, and the students who are in the remote areas, we had to send them USBs with materials on it. And then we had to bring them on campus, even whilst the lockdown level was still high. So we identified vulnerable students and brought them on campus. But here's the thing that I want to mention as something that I found something that the lockdown and the pandemic helped us to sort of somewhat start addressing, right? So the issue of helicopter research, Western researchers flying in here to collect data and jetting off, can't happen. They had to rely on us. So here we were, and we had a whole webinar series on the new global university. And we've got top scholars at UCT, no doubt about it. But some of the upcoming top scholars would always not be leading PIs, even though the data would be collected here. And we are in a prime space in terms of research in SKA or oceanography, even anthropology. And we found that many of our young people got an opportunity on grants to apply to be, and they were PIs collaborating with other people elsewhere in the world, because there's no opportunity for anyone to drop by, collect data, and jet off back to the West. And my hope is that this time where we are in now helps us to actually disrupt that practice of helicopter research by Western researchers. Because, I mean, not only has the world woken up to the fact that problems of the developing world are problems of the world, local problems are global problems. I think the pandemic has woken us up to that. We've been saying that's what it is. Whether you talk about poverty or inequality, it's the problems of the world, right? Now, I hope that this helps us to be a long-term disruption, and this sort of uncomfortable place that we are in as a result of the pandemic helps to shift what counts as excellent scholarship and whether African scholars actually can be lead PIs. Because I hope that in this few years of the pandemic, it's proven that we can be, and then we continue with the a new normal that includes the eradication of helicopter research. And a shared sort of a kind of leadership when it comes to global research programs.
Great, thank you very much. Robin, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thanks, Alistair. I mean, I'll say something which is somewhat specific to the UK context, although I think some similar things are afoot in Australia, although Carolyn will know much better, and also recently in North America. But I think over the last few years, universities have not been seen as part of the solution in the UK. So some of the politics surrounding universities has been difficult. Now, I would say this, I suppose, wouldn't I? Because I work in a university, but I really do think over the next decade or more, universities really are going to have to be part of the solution. I think there's going to be much greater need for lifelong learning, and universities will play a big role in that. That will require a bit of a pivot for some of us, where we're more used perhaps to teaching people between the ages of 18 and 23. But actually universities have got the skills and resources for lifelong learning. And I think also that there's going to be a huge fiscal challenge over at least the next 10 years when we consider some of the bills that have been run up to support societies and economies during the pandemic. And R&D and the innovations coming out of universities are going to be absolutely crucial to raising productivity, getting economic growth back, and meeting some of those bills. So quite how that's going to play out, that will be really interesting. But I think there are those two. You asked, what are the exciting opportunities coming up? And I think universities engaging with the skills agenda and playing an even greater role in R&D and productivity, I think those are two huge opportunities for us.
Great, thank you. Everyone's got their hands raised all of a sudden, so we've got about 5 minutes left. I'm sure we can get to everyone in time. Carolyn, would you like to go next?
I'll try and be quite quick then. Look, I think one of the really exciting opportunities is to do things at scale that had previously been largely limited to a small group of scholars, faculty or students. So internationally, there's of course a huge advantage to spending time in another country, in another culture, being surrounded, having that fully immersive experience, having the social and the cultural as well as the intellectual engagement. But that's always only been able to be for a small group of people. And as we become more and more conscious of our carbon footprint, the pressure, in fact, to limit that number even further will grow, and we're growing it on our own staff and students at the moment as we look to try and comply with carbon reduction. Having these online opportunities available, whether it be for major research projects, whether it be for introducing students to one another across different cultures and languages and different forms of education, will require some real thoughtfulness on our behalves about how we do that well, how we really add value, how we make sure that they're respectful partnerships. But we do have an opportunity now to do things at a scale that has never been possible before. And that means many more people will be exposed to it. The tricky thing that we've got to be careful of, to pick up on Robin's point, is that we can't become disassociated from our local environments, that we can't be sort of global digital citizens engaging with the elites of other countries and developing those skills and knowledges and understandings in a way that doesn't link back with immediate benefits for our community and the people around us, including the people who aren't part of our universities. But I actually think that we can show that when we work together across those global communities on big problems, we can have benefits that are both global and local simultaneously.
Great, thank you very much. Dr. Ayesha, can you tell us a little bit about how the Middle East and UAE you think is going to respond along to these challenges?
I think we have especially the UAE. I think we're very well positioned to lead the way, especially for the Middle East and our region. I think the opportunity that the past year and a half has opened to us is the ability to scale what we deliver, and then also deliver these courses to less privileged people, students that may be in refugee camps. We have a lot of turmoil in our region, and I think we can be a force of good, and the technology that is currently available will help us do that. And then picking on what was mentioned about collaboration and especially research, I think there's an opportunity for universities to work together on research projects that are relevant to the local communities and the local regions that might also be of interest to other regions. And then collaboratively, we could potentially come up with some great groundbreaking research or innovations that can help everyone. The other area, of course, that is of interest, and this is picking on the economic aspects and the role of that Robin mentioned, which is going to be very important as we look forward, in the next few years, and how we can bring about, economic growth, is the role of entrepreneurship and innovation in our economies. And I think there's also a great opportunity for universities to take a lead in that and to also collaborate together to, come up with solutions that can be beneficial to, countries and entire regions.
Thank you very much. Sally, we've got about 90 seconds left. I don't want to ask you to cover off 4 continents worth of PwC research and partnerships, but if you could tell us a little bit about, how this fits in with the work and what conversations you've had already with your partners.
Yeah, no, thank you, ALISTAIR. And it's really encouraging to hear the discussion around international collaboration, because we strongly feel that there's tremendous opportunity for academia to, as I mentioned early on, to lean in, help solve some of those difficult problems that our clients are facing, that society's facing. And another call to action that I have really for this community is to invite business, invite into the classroom more. You can do that now. Invite us in and help us challenge the students and faculty with the so what, and to sort of ground in practicality some of the concepts that you're teaching. Let me give you an example. We talk about our clients really struggling with how they are transparent around their progress towards the ESG goals. So how are they able to demonstrate to their shareholders, to their customers, that they are making real progress in measuring the reduction in carbon emissions, etc. The science behind this is really blunt still. And so as I prepare to potentially participate in some of the activities at COP26, I'd like to sort of leave leave this panel with that kind of call to action. You know, that's one area where we see our clients struggling enormously to apply science to what they're trying to achieve on a day-to-day basis. So please invite us more into the classroom and help us raise that awareness around the practical application, because we're running out of time.
Great.
We really are running out of time.
Yeah, absolutely, in every sense, sadly. I'm sorry we don't have more time to keep going. It's been wonderful to hear such a variety of international perspectives on this, and thank you, Sally, for stitching it all together with PwC's work and how you continue to engage with the higher education sector. I'd like to thank everyone for taking part today. Ayesha, Carolyn, Robin, and MAMOKGETI, thank you all very much. Thank you again to Sally for your help with this.